Well, hi there. Sharks, like these behind me, are quite possibly the coolest animals on the planet. They're some of the only animals that might even rival dinosaurs for the title of the coolest animals that have ever lived. They're so amazing. And a little while back, we talked about what I think is the coolest shark that you can readily obtain, the black-tipped reef shark. It is possible. You can get one, but the expense is not trivial. They're mostly reserved for Bond villains. But what if you're not a Bond villain? What if you're a person with somewhat normal means? Is there still a shark for you? Well, there might be. And though this shark, the Epaulette shark, is not the most common of all sharks in the pet trade, it is an available shark that is among, if not the most reasonable sharks to keep of them all. But being reasonable to keep doesn't mean it is worth keeping. I mean, is it lame? No. This is one of the coolest of all sharks, and that's saying a lot, as there are no lame sharks. Let me just skip to one of the coolest things about this shark. They walk. And it's pretty cool that they often walk on the seafloor, but they also walk on land. And that is cool for any non-tetrapod fish. Because if this is a fish and trout are fish, then you would be in that clade too. But when fish that aren't tetrapods, like these mud skippers or the lungfish, move around on land, well, that's cool. But the thing is that while fish like the lungfish have a swim bladder modified into a functional lung for air breathing, sharks do not have swim bladders at all. As we discussed earlier, sharks are not neutrally buoyant. They have a fatty liver that makes them slightly less dense, but they're heavier than water. And as it turns out, a fatty liver doesn't help you breathe on land. Not at all. Gills, when wet, work to some degree out of the water, but they aren't going to work well or for very long. So going on a little stroll down the beach sounds like a terrible idea for a shark, even if it does have two pairs of powerful fins that it can use to actually do the strolling. And yet they do. Because these sharks can go an extremely long time without oxygen by shutting off the blood supply to parts of their body and even parts of their brain that are not so necessary. You see, these sharks hunt primarily at night out on the reef, and they often become stranded in tide pools when the tide subsides. For most sharks, that just means you're going to die now. You see, the tide pools quickly become depleted of oxygen. If you're a shark, when the oxygen levels in your tide pool get low, your important cells start to die, and the rest of you soon follows. But if you're an Epaulette shark, you can go hours with almost no oxygen and an hour with literally none. And if things look really bad, you can just mosey over to a different tide pool where things look a little more promising, because these sharks are stinking rad. So these sharks are among the most reasonable to keep of all sharks. They are stinking rad land fish, but is the Epaulette shark a good pet? And is it the best pet fish for you? To figure this out, we have returned to the amazing Loveland Living Planet Aquarium in Draper, Utah to score the Epaulette shark based on our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. When it comes to handleability, we give the Epaulette shark a score of 3 out of 5. I don't think there is a chance of a shark getting a higher score than this. But this is the most handleable shark, at least for a true shark. For one thing, their bite isn't too bad, for a shark bite. It's not like it's one of those things that I just do for fun. But if someone was like, we'll give you $1 million to let this Epaulette shark bite you, I'd probably not have to give it too much thought. I'd rather be bitten hard by an Epaulette shark than a person. That said, they eat a lot of crabs and other crustaceans, so despite having small teeth, I'm sure it's no picnic. And pretty much unless you're hand feeding them with your fingers, there isn't much of a chance of being bitten. Plenty of keepers do hand feed their Epaulette sharks by pinching food between their knuckles and presenting the food with a closed fist. So if you greet your shark with a COVID fist bump instead of a 2019 handshake, you should be good as far as bites. They're also manageably sized. And again, they can survive out of the water for a long time. It's probably technically possible to snuggle an epaulette shark on the couch and watch a couple episodes of Friends without causing any harm to your shark. Probably not advisable though. But they are as handleable out of the water as any shark and extremely personable and relatively safe to interact with in the water. Sharks aren't puppies, but this is the most puppy-like of all sharks. When it comes to care, we give the epaulette shark a score of 2 out of 5. I will say that I was tempted to go higher. For a shark, this is as easy to care for as it's going to get. They live in tide pools. But no shark is easy to care for. They live in salt water. Even small ones, like these, are large fish, and they're messy. That's not a recipe for easy. First, you need to be a competent saltwater aquarium keeper. We go into greater detail about what this entails in our video about cuttlefish, which are awesome and you should check it out really no matter what. But long story short, saltwater is no picnic. And being messy eaters and big means that you'll need to do a lot of saltwater water changes. Hooray! But the good news is that for a shark, this is very easy to house and care for. It is possible to keep an adult epaulette shark in an aquarium around 200 gallons, though they will use something bigger. This means that you will need to be seriously into saltwater fish keeping. You will need to have space and some money, but you don't need to be a Bond villain. Sand makes a good substrate. They'll hide and wedge themselves into tank decor. Just make sure that it's not precariously positioned or sharp. When it comes to food, the epaulette shark eats what it can find in tide pools. Crustaceans, worms, and fish make up the bulk of their wild diet and will be greatly appreciated in captivity as well. They will turn smaller tank mates into shark energy if given the chance, so probably don't put anything with them you don't want to see eaten. And make sure they cannot escape the tank. At least if they do get out, they will be walking around for a while, hardly using any oxygen, so you might be able to find them in time. Obviously, I'm very interested in these sharks because this is something I would actually potentially like to own someday. But I'm not ready yet, and fortunately we have Elsa here from the Loveland Living Planet Aquarium who keeps these epaulette sharks, who can tell us a little bit more about what exactly would we need to know and what does a person need to be prepared for when considering an epaulette shark.
There is a lot that you should be prepared for with epaulettes. As you may know, these are one of the species of sharks that can actually crawl across land, which is something that you need to consider when taking them into your care. They can hold their breath for up to 2 hours, so you need to determine if you want to build them the type of habitat that allows them to move around freely, or if you want to make your tank deep enough so that they can't do that. That's probably like my primary suggestion. They will try to poke their head out occasionally and just kind of see where they can go, especially if they are uncomfortable at the moment.
That is so cool. Okay, let me ask you this. What are the reasons that a person who is serious about getting an epaulette shark should get an epaulette shark? And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, which is, why would a person probably not want to get an epaulette shark?
Epaulette sharks are really cool. I think people would really want to get one just because, I mean, when they're juveniles, they're super adorable. They make really great pets. You can put them, you don't even have to have a super large tank for them. You can keep them in like a regular saltwater aquarium. They can fit in pretty much with like reef life, or they can just go in a tank with a bunch of rocks and sand and they're happy. One of the downsides that you should be aware of is they will get pretty big. They'll get up to like 90 centimeters, really close to about 3 feet long. Keep that in mind as you have one at your house. They don't grow super fast, but within 2 to 3 years, you're gonna have a full-grown shark on your hands.
I think sometimes we like to, you see something like a Nile monitor baby and you're like, okay, well, I don't have a space for a Nile monitor, but I have space for the baby. And hopefully in 2 or 3 years when it's big, I will then be able to have it. But oftentimes people get to the point where then has arrived and their situation is the same as it was before. And that's probably something you could run into big time with an epaulette shark. Unfortunately, it's not a black tip or something. It's not something that you have to be a Bond villain to afford, but a proper aquarium for a 3-foot shark is...
It's pretty big.
It's serious.
It's going to be kind of expensive to get all that salt water, all those rocks. You should have proper furnishings for it. And remember, the bigger it gets, the more it's going to need to eat. And you can't just feed a shark pellets. They actually need to have some real seafood.
What would you say, or how would you say that these compare in difficulty to kind of more traditional saltwater fish?
I would say that comparing them to just like a traditional fish, I would say they rank a little bit higher in difficulty. For just a regular saltwater fish tank that does not have an epaulette shark, you can pretty much feed it whatever you want. You can throw some pellets, some flakes, some little like blister packs of frozen foods. Once you start getting into at-home shark care, you're needing to look at really varying up a diet for an epaulette shark. They really rely on having almost a different food almost every day. So you're going to need to start providing a lot of shrimp, a lot of clam, a lot of fish. So you need to store that in your house as well and actually prepare that in your house for them.
Does that lead to a need for more water changes?
It does,
well?
Yeah. So the bigger they get, the more waste they're going to produce. Depending on what size tank you have, you're probably looking at doing about a 20% water change once a week will be really good, but you'll still grow a lot of algae just like a regular saltwater aquarium. You're still going to battle pretty much all the same battles that you would if you had like a coral tank or just like a little reef fish tank.
So it sounds like, for the most part, this is obviously a bigger saltwater fish, so you need a bigger tank, though it's not a super active saltwater fish, so not as big as you might imagine you would need for say, one of these guys at 3 feet.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it sounds to me like it's not wholly different from just general saltwater fish keeping.
Yeah. You still want to keep an eye on your salinity, on your water parameters. The one thing that would be a little bit different is that these sharks are nocturnal. At night, it's just in their instinct that they're going to want to walk around, they're going to want to forage for food. And that's when they're going to try to climb out of the tank if you give them the opportunity to make it up to the surface.
Well, I'm going to tell you, when I talked to you before about jellyfish, you solidified for me, I don't want any jellyfish. But I think the way I'm walking away from this is an epaulette shark should not be my first saltwater fish keeping experience. But if I'm good at keeping saltwater tanks, this is a totally reasonable thing to keep. And that's very exciting because usually when I research sharks, I walk away going, this is not a good idea. And this is not a totally bad idea. Plus, they breed fairly readily in captivity. You guys breed them right here.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So, I mean, if you're thinking about getting an epaulette shark, definitely, again, do your research. Make sure I would suggest have a saltwater tank probably prior. Don't just jump straight into an epaulette shark. You should get a feel for what water quality is like, how to do a water change, maybe how to decorate their home. Be prepared to switch up all those decorations. But yeah, they do breed fairly readily. A female can produce an egg basically every 14 days, and they breed usually from August to December. But again, it does depend kind of on the season, basically what's in the water, maybe the temperature of the water. So they do have kind of their own little parameters that they stick to as well.
Well, I'm super excited about this. This is super exciting. I'm going to get a saltwater tank as soon as I have the time for one.
Definitely start practicing.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is awesome. I'm so excited. And thank you for showing us all these amazing things.
You're so welcome.
When it comes to hardiness, we give the epaulette shark a score of 4 out of 5. This is where these sharks really shine. They're pretty durable. Of course, you need to keep them properly, but the world of tide pools is one that isn't automatically stable. Keep salinity, pH, and nitrogenous waste levels within correct parameters, but this is a more robust fish than most marine fish, and they can live around 2 decades. They are hosts to a number of parasites, many of them marine isopods, but they don't seem to do any major or long-term damage. When it comes to availability, we give the Epaulette shark a score of 2 out of 5. So a while back, during our blacktip reef shark video, I told you that I would give you more detail about what claspers do when you were older. Well, you're older now, and I think you're ready. Epaulette sharks are not the easiest to find of all sharks. That title is probably held by the bamboo cat sharks. But they are fairly available, and I wouldn't be shocked at all to see them at a marine expo or a good marine pet store. Where you can find them consistently is online directly from a breeder. These sharks breed readily in captivity, and that is where the claspers come into play. You see, most fish have external fertilization, where the female lays eggs and the male drops a little sperm onto them. The two don't even necessarily need to be at the same place at the same time. But sharks and other members of the chondrichthyes have internal fertilization, where the eggs are fertilized within the female. This means that the male needs to deliver his sperm inside of the body cavity of the female. Well, that is what the claspers do. They are sperm delivery apparati. And Epaulette sharks are very easy to breed in captivity, even in aquaria that the home aquarist could potentially acquire. So it's actually not unreasonable to be an Epaulette shark breeder. The male actually engulfs the pectoral fin of the female in his mouth and then uses his clasper to introduce sperm into the body cavity of said female. The female later lays some really cool looking eggs called mermaid purses that later hatch, revealing an awesome little shark. And given their ability to survive in low oxygen environments, they're not even that difficult to ship for a shark. When it comes to upfront costs, we give the Epaulette shark a score of 1 out of 5. The shark itself is expensive, but it would score higher if that is where the costs ended. They don't. A 200+ gallon saltwater fish tank with a good lid and filtration unit is not Bond villain expensive, but it will cost about as much as I have historically looked to spend on a car. That said, it will be an amazing tank, and those cars were pretty lousy. On top of that, you will need a lot of equipment to run your tank and ensure proper water conditions. Substrate, decor. Look, it's gonna be really expensive. This is reasonable for a shark, but I don't remember when anybody said that sharks were reasonable to keep. But they're cool enough that if this is what you really want, then you can probably make it happen someday without even popping up on the radar of MI6. And in the meantime, you can enjoy these sharks, as well as some far less reasonable sharks and a host of other absolutely incredible and unreasonable to keep animals here at the Loveland Living Planet Aquarium. Honestly, if I were a Bond villain, I would probably just live here. I love it here. If you're ever in Utah, I strongly encourage you to make this place a part of your stay. I can't imagine a person that would watch this video and not have an absolutely spectacular day here. And this is why we give the Epaulette shark an overall score of 2.4 out of 5. That isn't a great score, but it is by far the best score we have ever given to a true shark. There are some others that might give it a run for its money, and some that are much worse, but I would really like to talk about anyway. So let me know if you would like to hear about more quasi-reasonable pet sharks, or if you'd like to hear about some stinking rad unreasonable pet sharks. But if what you want is a shark, and it has to be a real shark, and it has to be cool, and you're serious about having a shark, and you're not a Bond villain, then the Epaulette shark might be the best pet shark for you. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon.